Hello and welcome back to UGA Sailing on YouTube. My name is Allison and today we are talking about finishing strategies. So we're going to hit a couple of techniques first and then we're going to talk about ways in which those might be useful depending on where you are in the fleet. Okay, the first concept we're going to discuss is protecting the right side of the course as you come around the leeward mark to ensure that you are crossing the finish line on a starboard tack. So in this scenario right here, we have a starboard tack boat crossing with a port tack boat. And going back to one of the simplest right-of-way rules, a starboard tack boat has right-of-way over a port tack boat. So this boat must either tack or duck to avoid making this boat change their course. So your goal in a finishing situation is to not be this boat right here. So the way you do that is by protecting the right side of the course and ensuring that you spend the majority of your sailing time on the last beat in this area. And that will set you up for a starboard tack cross on the finish line. Next concept we're talking about is called covering. And covering means putting your boat in between your destination and the boats behind you. Okay, so let's walk through a leeward mark rounding scenario. Very simple. We're gonna have a boat that just came around and is heading off in this direction. And there was a boat who rounded before them, who hasn't tacked off yet, who is on the same trajectory here, but just a little bit farther ahead. So if this boat wanted to cover and protect their position, they would wait for this boat to tack off and go right here. And then they would do the same, they would tack off. And this distance right here is a very healthy distance to maintain to ensure that you finish in front of them. So if you tack when the people behind you tack, you are successfully covering and protecting your spot in the fleet. Another way to set this up is if you are the first boat reaching the leeward mark in the grouping that you want to protect, you can head up and gain speed. It's really important that you don't just pull an entire 360 around the mark because that's very slow. So you round the mark and you get speed, but then as soon as you are up to full speed again, you tack off immediately. Right here. And then the boats that are coming in behind you, let's say you made it up to right here before another boat comes in. So now this is you and this is the boat you're trying to cover. As soon as they come around the leeward mark, you tack off. And again, this is a really nice distance to maintain to ensure that you will finish in front of them. So with any covering technique, the rule of thumb is to tack when the person below you tacks. And you just keep that distance going all the way up the course to your destination. So if this boat tacks off right here, you do the same, and vice versa. It just goes like this, and there's always that space in between you and the boats that you want to keep below you. Now in an easy covering situation, you might be covering just one or 3 or 5 boats. But the tricky part comes into play when you're trying to cover, let's say like a group of 15. And with that, you can't focus on just one boat. You have to look at the trends of the whole fleet. So if the majority of them are tacking off this way, you might want to get on that same tack to cover them. If there are 3 stragglers still remaining on that tack, don't worry about them. It's about the majority that you are keeping covered to make sure that you finish in front of them. Next concept is finishing at the favored end of the line. This becomes important when the wind has shifted off to one side or the other, making one end of the line closer to the leeward mark than the other. So by crossing at the favored end of the line, that is the shortest distance and the fastest point to your finish line. Okay, here is our standard last beat of a race, and our wind is coming perpendicular to the line. This is the golden scenario, how we all hope to finish, but it does not always happen that way, and probably more often than not, the wind is going to be skewed to one side because nature, it just changes. So even if the race committee set it perfectly square at the beginning of the race, things happen throughout the duration of the race, and the wind might be skewed toward the end of the race when you are trying to finish. So let's move our wind off to the port side, and we're going to figure out which side of the line is favored, which side will give you the shortest distance from this point to this point. So if we draw lines like this perpendicular to the wind direction and visualize it like ladder rungs that you have to climb up, the favored end of the line is going to be the side that winds up on the lowest ladder rung that is closest to you. So in this case right here, with our wind shifted off to the port side, Our race committee boat is hitting this ladder rung right here, and then our pin is hitting this one up here. So the boat end of the line would be your favored side in this situation. So if you round the leeward mark, your goal is to finish on that side, because that will be your shortest distance sailed between the leeward mark and your finish line. And those people finishing on the pin end of the line are going to sail a longer distance than you, and they will risk finishing behind you. So your goal is to finish at the favored end of the line. Okay, let's draw our lines the other way and shift the wind off to the starboard tack. And, you can probably guess what's going to happen. The favored end of the line is going to shift, but we'll draw it out just so you can see everything on the other side. So our original wind was coming from here, and now we're going to shift our wind off to this side. We're going to draw some perpendicular lines to the wind direction and see what that does. Okay, we have our ladder rungs drawn. So our race committee boat is hitting at this rung right here, and our pin is hitting at this rung. So if you were climbing up your ladder this way, this rung is closest to you, which means that your pin end of the line is favored. And if you sail to the pin end of the line, you are sailing the shortest distance possible. Okay, we're going to visualize it in another way. We're going to move the line and keep the wind square, so you can see how that looks. Either way works, however you want to visualize it works, as long as you arrive at the right conclusion of which side of the line is favored. So we are going to keep this square. Now our line is skewed. This one is generally easier to visualize on a whiteboard because, duh, this side is lower than this side. But when you're on the race course, the ladder rungs might be more useful to you because the line in your vision could look very square. So to think about the wind direction on the water as a series of perpendicular ladder rungs might give you more success than this right here, but we're just going to go over both ways to visualize it, and you can use whatever you like. So if our line is skewed this way, if you can imagine, that means our wind is off to the left. If you were looking at this square, the race committee boat end of the line is lower and therefore makes the favored end of the line the starboard end. And if we flip it in the other direction, our pin is lower than our race committee boat, therefore making the pin end of the line the favored end. So if you sail to the pin, you are sailing the shortest distance possible, and anyone sailing to the non-favored end of the line risks finishing behind you. Okay, let's talk about some tips and tricks if you don't want to use those methods to figure out where the favored end of the line is. If you are sitting mid-fleet, so like in a fleet of 20, if you're sitting at around 10 or anything in that general area, the boats finishing in front of you might be trending toward the favored end of the line already. If you see everyone solely finishing at the pin end of the line, they've probably figured it out, and that is probably the favored end of the line. So if you trust your competitors to figure that out for you ahead of time, be my guest. Obviously, the best way for you to figure this out is on your own knowledge and experience, and that way you don't have to rely on other people, but that is an option. Next up, the boats sailing the lifted tack will be pointing to the favored end of the line. So if our wind is skewed off to the right here, that means that based on our previous wind direction, our boats are now pointing higher on a starboard tack than they are on a port tack. See that? So when our wind is skewed off here, the port tack is kind of running parallel to the line. So the boats sailing the lifted tack, this one right here, are going to point toward the favored end of the line. So in this case, they are pointing to the pin end of the line, making your pin end favored. And if you double check that in your head with the ladder rung thing, if we go here, the race committee boat's going to hit that ladder rung, and then we keep going down, and then this one is the closest ladder rung to your leeward mark. So it all checks out, it all points to the same direction. However you want to think about it is fine. And lastly, there are flags on the committee boat that you can see from pretty far away. Let's put our wind direction over here. This is where it was set originally, but now the wind has shifted off to the left. Let's say that makes our flag do this. That means that your wind is off to the left if you need that sort of a visual aid. And when our wind is off to the left, that means that the starboard end of the line is favored, and sailing there will get you there the fastest. So again, it checks out. Draw your lines perpendicular to the wind direction, and this one hits first, and then comes the committee boat. So the closest ladder rung to you is the shortest distance sailed, and that is your favored end of the line. Next up is the concept of shooting the line, and can be used for any wind direction, whether it be perpendicular or skewed off to one side. But it's most commonly used when a grouping of boats or just two boats are neck and neck, and you need to squeeze out a finish faster than the people around you. So this is when you don't have a lead, when you don't have that nice grace period between you and the next person behind you. So this is when everything is just really crammed and really hectic, and you need to just finish before everyone. Okay, so we're going to have two boats crossing on a starboard tack, and the adrenaline is rushing, and you are just absolutely trying to go as fast as you can. So the idea of shooting the line is taking your momentum from this fast, close-hauled tack and bringing your boat head to wind in the irons position where your sails are luffing, but just pointing your boat and putting it across the finish line, because that's all you have to do to finish. Rules don't say what point of sail you have to be on to have a successful finish. The rules say the second the bow of your boat touches the finish line, that is your finish. So it doesn't matter what point of sail you're on. So if you are this boat right here and you're trying to eke out a finish beyond this boat, if you just turn your boat head to wind, you are automatically across the line. And this boat still has this distance left to sail. So your path would end up looking like this. If you're both coming up, you would just do this and drift across. And if you can visualize that extra little space that they have to sail if they were to remain on a close hold can be negated just by you turning head to wind. Now, this is something to be practiced during one of your training sessions, because if you do this too early, your momentum will run out and you will not get to the finish line, and it'll be a very awkward feeling. So it should really be used as close to the finish line as possible, just to eke out the boat that you are neck and neck with. Okay, let's briefly talk about what happens when you're finishing downwind, and I'll give you a hint. It's the opposite of what it is finishing upwind. All right, here's our wind. We're gonna look at the ladder rungs one more time. This is our previous wind, so we'll put that in parentheses, and now we're going to shift it off to the left. So let's draw some rungs here. All right, if we were finishing upwind, we would want to finish at the committee boat end of the line, because that is the shortest distance from the leeward mark, because it is the lowest ladder rung perpendicular to the wind. If you are finishing downwind, however, that flips. So whereas we would want the lowest rung if we were finishing upwind, we want the highest one if we're finishing downwind, because that's going to be the favored end of the line for a downwind finish. So again, here's where the committee boat is hitting, and here's where the pin is hitting, this rung right here. If you have a downwind finish, the pin is closer upwind than the committee boat, and therefore it is in your best interest to finish downwind at the pin. And let's briefly talk about shooting the line if you are finishing downwind. The same concept applies, except that you don't have to go head to wind, because that would be the wrong direction. Let's say you have two boats approaching the line as so, on a little bit of a reach, not directly downwind. If you find yourself in this situation and you need to eke out a finishing place, all you have to do is point directly at the line. So by turning your boat to point downwind right at the end there, you're closing off this distance and making it much shorter. So finally, let's wrap this all up in a nutshell and recap on when you use these techniques. So if you are doing well in the race, your job is to keep doing well. And to do that, you cover the heck out of the boats behind you to make sure that they do not finish in front of you. Cover, 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 cover. If you are not doing well and you have plenty of boats in front of you, sail as smart as possible. Make sure you are in the maximum wind on the course. If one side is heavier than the other, go to that side. Make sure that you are finishing at the favored end of the line and follow the basic rules of sailing fast. Anyone in front of you who forgets to do these basic things will fall behind you. If your focus is on covering when you are so far behind in the fleet, you will never make boats up, because your focus is on the boats behind you and not the boats in front of you. So, doing well, cover. Not doing well, sail smartly, go to the favored end of the line. So, that is all we have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments or recommendations for more videos, leave them down below. And please visit our channel to see some more videos. We appreciate your feedback, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.